Welcome. This is the last of the art historical lectures for the art appreciation class, both the online and on-campus class. And so this is the first lecture for Unit 10. Unit 10 is our last unit. And our last art historical lecture was on the beginnings of modernism. And there are a few points I want to recap about that just to make sure that we're all clear. I just want to emphasize that, the beginning of modernism, the artwork may not have, to your eyes, have looked particularly modern. Looked much more 19th century, but it was part of modernism because of the core ideas that it contained. And those basic ideas of of modernism are the belief in progress, the belief that human endeavor is, progressive, things get better, and that aesthetics specifically is progressive, that artwork is improving over time, and that it is therefore the goal of an artist to constantly be pushing that progress further along. And so, um, and then another point would be the belief in um, kind of a essential universal aesthetics. And it's kind of related, like if things are progressing, there must be some there must be good and bad, and therefore there must be something to progress towards. So there needs to be a way, therefore, to look at art of any time period and evaluate it being, its quality. Um, and so those are two, you could say, the belief in progress and what you could describe as formalism, two fundamental parts of modernism. And another part of modernism that is going to become kind of increasingly important is the role of the artist. the If you remember when we talked about romanticism, the role of the artist was extremely important in the romantic period. But there, the artist was seen as in opposition to society, who the artist would often remove himself from society because he was misunderstood and because he was so special and different from society. Whereas the modernists saw the artist as special and also as heroic, but less as separate from society, more as in front of. Um, Later, there comes to come by the 20th century, we have this idea of the artist as the avant-garde, where the artist is the tip of the triangle, so to speak, the leading force of culture, and so that the artists are pushing towards whatever the new culture, and so that they are getting to the new culture first. Excuse me, because I have a pretty bad cold. Um, and then another aspect of modernism that continues into the high modernist period is um, the, let's see, what did I cover? I covered the belief in progress, formalism, and the artist. Oh yeah, and we in the in the 19th century, very important part of modernism was this interest in realism and honesty, in portraying things the way they really are. And this started out as very much a social realist inclination, a desire to really tell the truth about the way human society was and what was really going on. And this, over time, shifted towards more of an interest in optical realism, an interest in how we actually see the world, the physical way we see the world, and how the way we see is different from the way we think we see. And as we move into the 20th century, this interest in realism becomes more focused on what you might call aesthetic realism, an interest in the honesty of art being honest about itself, like a painting being clearly upfront and honest about being a painting. Um, and so those ideas are linked. Sometimes it's hard to see that, like say this painting here by Malevich, that this is in a way um, much about the same issues as a Courbet, that it's about trying to be honest with your materials. The difference here is that Malevich is trying to be honest about the painting being a painting, whereas Courbet was more interested in the painting being honest about what it was portraying. Okay, so that's kind of a sum up. And so for this lecture, we're talking about modernism of the first half of the 20th century, mostly ending around the 30s. We don't get much further than that. And well, let's move on for a second. So much of the artwork that we're going to be looking at today is very formalist artwork, but I wanted to emphasize that trend towards formalism, towards reductive, simplified, more economical, more abstract, but abstract in a very specific, reduced kind of way, in a very geometric way, um, is only one part of the trend. Another major part of the trend was this interest in the individual and the individual's ability to express him or herself. And so we also see, as same time as we see some movements and some artists really pushing towards more and more reductive formalism, we also see other artists kind of pushing towards personal visions of expression. And so I wanted to start with a couple of artists, Munch and then also James Ensor. And I think it's important to remember that this isn't so much an issue between those that pursued abstraction and those that didn't, because these are both examples of abstraction. It's just different types of abstraction. And I think this will make a little bit more sense when we see some of the other artists. And then this also leads to another artist that I want to talk about who's going to lead into Matisse, and that's Pierre Bernard. Bernard is one of my favorites. Well, let's go back just for a second to Munch, because Munch is an amazing painter. This self-portrait by Munch right here is an amazing, beautiful work. I was just talking about this today with a ex-student of mine who teaches at a high school, and his work is very, very personal and specific. And you'll notice I'm not showing his scream at all. But James Ensor is also, in a very different way, but a very personal and idiosyncratic artist who had a very, his own unique vision of religion and of culture, and his paintings were all about that. And then at the same time, we have artists like Pierre Bernard. Pierre Bernard comes out of the kind of same tradition as Vuillard, who we don't really have time to talk about, but he is one of my favorite painters of all time. And his use of color, his understanding of how to limit value range and how to replace value contrast with temperature contrast is just amazing. Such gorgeous works. And Bonnard's work leads right up to Matisse. And that's where we will end for right now. Okay, thank you.